The pen tore through the page like a slow blade. Each stroke carved the air, sharp and final, echoing across the courtroom's marble walls. Elena Marquez stood motionless beside the table. She didn't flinch when the man across from her laughed softly, that hollow, condescending sound that had followed her for years. Across the polished wood, Thomas Vale leaned back, signing his name with unnecessary flourishes, the gesture of a man convinced of his own importance. When the ink dried, he placed the pen down like a weapon no longer needed. "Finally," he whispered, loud enough for her to hear. Freedom. Not hers. His. The word hit her like a gust of cold air, not because the marriage was ending, that part had died long ago, but because of the way he said it, as if being tied to her had been an inconvenience, a burden to carry for appearances. To him, Elena had been a symbol, not a partner, a woman tolerated, never honored. The judge cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the silence. "Before we conclude, there's another document we must address." He reached for a second envelope, sealed in dark wax and marked with an insignia Elena hadn't seen in years, the emblem of her late father, Dr. Gabriel Marquez. Something shifted in the air. Thomas's smirk faltered. Elena's fingers tightened around her purse, her heart pounding once, then steadying into a calm rhythm. She had learned long ago that power lived in stillness. The courtroom smelled of dust and varnish. The light fell in angled stripes through tall windows, cutting shadows across the floor. Elena focused on the sound of her breathing, even, deliberate, the same way her father taught her to stand through storms. She remembered his voice, soft but certain. Dignity is not silence. It is the strength to wait until truth speaks for you. For years, Thomas had mistaken her quiet for weakness. He called her fortunate, said her success as a civil engineer was the product of pity, of politics, of timing. He mocked the way clients respected her precision, her calm under pressure. He told friends she was ambitious only because she wanted to prove she belonged. She never answered, not because she agreed, because she was building something he could never touch, a life anchored in patience, integrity, and memory. The judge broke the wax seal. The crack echoed like a gunshot. Thomas straightened, uneasy. The judge unfolded the letter, reading aloud. "To my daughter, who will walk unseen through rooms of judgment, I leave more than what I earned. I leave the truth I've witnessed, every slight, every cruelty, every mask that fell too late. Keep your head high, child. The world will learn who you are when silence ends." Elena's throat tightened. For the first time all morning, she allowed herself to breathe fully. Thomas shifted again. "What is this?" he muttered, voice trembling with impatience. No one answered. The judge continued reading quietly, scanning pages, his brow furrowing. He looked up once, meeting Elena's eyes, a brief, knowing glance. Something in it felt like recognition, as if he saw her for the first time. Memory returned, sharp and clear, 3 years earlier, the night she came home holding a letter of triumph. Her firm had selected her design for the city's new bridge, a landmark project worth millions. She had walked through their apartment glowing with joy. "Thomas, they chose my proposal," she said. "We won." He didn't turn from the television. "Of course they did," he replied. "They needed someone like you on the brochure." The words hung heavy in the air. She stared at him, waiting for a smile, a trace of pride. It never came. "Someone like me?" she asked. He shrugged, sipping his wine. "A face they can show, a woman, an immigrant's daughter, makes them look progressive." The laughter she carried home vanished. In its place, a silence that would stretch for years. Now, in the courtroom, that silence cracked. The judge closed the file gently. "This document," he said, "contains records, letters, testimonies, matters that may affect these proceedings." Thomas frowned. "That's absurd. Gabriel was a small-town doctor." The judge didn't respond. He gathered the envelope, eyes still on Elena. "Some legacies speak louder than we expect." Elena felt it then, a quiet tremor under her skin, not of fear but of awakening. Her father had always prepared her for this, the day truth would rise from the quiet and claim its place. Thomas turned toward her, searching her face for weakness. He found none. "Is this your doing?" he whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because the stillness around her had changed. It no longer felt like submission. It felt like power waiting to move. Outside, the city thrummed beyond the courthouse. The hum of traffic, the distant wail of a siren, the steady pulse of a world that hadn't noticed what was about to begin. Inside, the ink dried on the divorce papers. The marriage was over. But something larger had begun to stir. A truth forged in years of quiet endurance, now ready to speak. The judge stood. "We will reconvene shortly." Thomas leaned back, feigning calm, but his knuckles whitened on the table. Elena rose slowly, her posture unbroken, her gaze level. For the first time in years she felt seen, not as the woman he dismissed, but as someone standing at the threshold of revelation. As she walked toward the exit, the envelope remained on the table, heavy and sealed again. Inside it, her father's voice waited, patient, unwavering. The door closed behind her, leaving the faint echo of her heels and the whisper of something inevitable. Change. Rain swept across the courthouse steps as Elena stepped outside, the first drops tracing cold lines across her cheeks. She didn't move to wipe them away. The sky was heavy and gray, mirroring the weight she carried. Not sorrow, but anticipation. Something had begun inside that room, something larger than divorce or humiliation. The sealed envelope burned in her mind like a quiet ember. Beside her, attorney Lila Fernandez tightened her coat and glanced sideways. "You didn't say anything back there," she murmured. "That was smart. Let him stew." Elena nodded, her voice steady. "My father always said, silence unsettles the guilty more than shouting ever could." They crossed the plaza in silence. Cars hissed along wet pavement, their reflections bending in the puddles. Elena walked slower than usual, each step deliberate, as if she were listening for a sound beneath the noise, the whisper of what was coming. Inside her chest, the ache of old wounds pulsed again, not from loss, but from the memory of being unseen. Later that evening, her apartment felt colder than usual. The walls were bare, stripped of photographs and keepsakes. She had packed them weeks ago, preparing for the end. Now, the emptiness suited her, clean, uncluttered, waiting to be rebuilt. She placed the envelope on the table. The seal had been broken in court, but the contents remained unread. Her hand hovered over it. For a moment, she imagined her father sitting across from her, his dark eyes calm, his voice low. "Every truth has its hour," he would have said. "Don't rush what the world isn't ready to hear." She drew a slow breath and opened the folder. Inside, she found more than a letter. There were documents, transcripts, recordings, signed affidavits, evidence gathered quietly over years. Her father's handwriting filled the margins, notes written with a surgeon's precision. Each page told a story. Business contracts Thomas had manipulated, clients he had slandered, accounts he had diverted. And woven through the evidence were fragments of something deeper, Letters from judges, politicians, and community leaders, men and women who spoke of Gabriel Marquez not as a mere doctor, but as a confidant, a man who had healed bodies and guarded secrets. Elena's fingers trembled. Her father hadn't only left her protection, he had left her truth, a fortress built in silence. A knock startled her. She closed the folder, sliding it aside. When she opened the door, Lila stood there, her hair damp from the rain, a paper bag in hand. "You shouldn't be alone tonight," she said softly. "I brought dinner." Elena hesitated, then stepped back to let her in. The scent of roasted vegetables and rosemary filled the apartment. For a few moments they ate in silence. Finally, Lila spoke. "You know he'll fight dirty now. Men like him don't accept losing." Elena's gaze drifted to the envelope on the table. "He's already lost. He just doesn't know it yet." Something flickered across Lila's face. Admiration, maybe fear. "You're planning something." Elena didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth wasn't a weapon yet, but it would be. The next morning, the city woke beneath a pale sun. Elena returned to her office, where her small team greeted her cautiously. Rumors of the divorce had spread. Whispers followed her like shadows. "Good morning," said Mateo, her junior engineer, eyes uncertain. "The council called. They want a revision on the bridge design." "Tell them I'll deliver it by Thursday," she replied. Her tone calm but clipped. Work was sanctuary. Precision was armor. As the hours passed, sketches filled her table. Steel arcs, suspension lines, calculations flowing like quiet music. Yet, beneath the numbers, her mind drifted to her father's files. Each page was a piece of a puzzle she hadn't yet assembled. By noon, a message arrived on her phone. Thomas Vale. 3 missed calls. 1 new voicemail. She didn't listen. He was beginning to feel the shift. And that was enough. That evening, Elena met Lila again, this time at a quiet cafe tucked between old buildings. The air smelled of espresso and rain-soaked stone. They sat in the corner booth, voices low. "I've reviewed part of the file," Lila said. "Your father documented everything. Fraud, defamation, even the forged credentials Thomas used for his firm." Elena stared into her cup. "He thought no one would notice. People like him never think they'll be caught. You could destroy him with this." Elena's eyes lifted, steady and unreadable. "Not yet. It has to matter. Not just to me." Lila leaned back, studying her. "You're not after revenge." "No," Elena said quietly. "I'm after recognition. For truth. For what he tried to erase." Outside, a bus rumbled past, splashing through puddles. The world moved on, unaware of the storm forming beneath its surface. That night, sleep eluded her. She walked through her father's old study, the room she'd recreated in her apartment. The shelves held his worn medical texts, a framed photograph of him smiling in his white coat, and a brass clock ticking softly in the corner. She placed her hand on the photo frame. "You knew," she whispered. "You saw what I couldn't." The silence answered her, steady and patient. Somewhere in that stillness she felt a promise, not of vengeance but of unveiling. Truth, when ready, would speak for itself. Days passed. Thomas's calls multiplied. Then came the message from his lawyer, a formal challenge to the divorce terms, claims of shared assets, threats of public exposure. Elena read the document once, then set it aside. She had evidence stronger than greed. The record of his deceit, his arrogance, his words sharpened by prejudice. She wouldn't shout. She would let the truth unfold piece by piece until it left him nowhere to stand. At her desk, she unfolded her latest blueprint, the bridge that would span the city's river, a symbol of connection, of resilience. Her pencil traced the final curve, the line precise, unwavering. Outside the window, the rain began again, steady, cleansing. Elena watched it fall and felt the quiet rise inside her once more. Not weakness, not fear. The calm before revelation. And somewhere in the distance a door was opening. Morning light spilled across the skyline, a thin blade of gold cutting through clouds. Elena stood by her apartment window, coffee cooling in her hands, watching the city stir beneath her. Cars glided along wet streets. Office lights blinked awake in distant towers. Everything moved forward, indifferent, as if yesterday's decisions had never happened. But the world had changed. Quietly, invisibly, it had begun to tilt. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. You don't understand what you're doing. T." She stared at the screen for a long time before locking it again. He was unraveling. Thomas Vale, always composed, always sure of the ground beneath him, was beginning to feel the edges crumble, and that was only the beginning. At the office, the team gathered around the conference table. Rolled blueprints lay open, inked with clean lines and measured dreams. The new bridge project was moving forward, but questions from the city council loomed. Budgets, deadlines, political tension. Elena listened carefully, her voice calm, her instructions precise. Work was rhythm, structure, a language she controlled. But beneath that calm, something restless stirred, the awareness of what she carried in her father's file. Each page whispered possibilities, each note a thread leading deeper into a hidden network she was only beginning to see. By afternoon, her assistant handed her a sealed envelope. "From the courthouse," he said, marked confidential. Elena waited until her office door closed before opening it. Inside, a summons. A new motion filed by Thomas's attorneys. He was contesting the property division, alleging fraud. The irony almost made her laugh. She placed the papers beside the folder marked Marquez Estate. Two stories were about to collide, one built on arrogance, the other on truth, and only one would survive. That evening, she met Lila in the small library above the old law firm. Dust floated in the lamplight like falling ash. The lawyer leaned over the table, eyes sharp. "He's panicking," Lila said, tapping the documents. "The more desperate he becomes, the more reckless his moves. But that helps us. We let him dig." Elena sat back, hands folded in her lap. "You've reviewed everything?" "Almost." Lila flipped open a file. "Your father didn't just record Thomas's cruelty. He documented his entire web, falsified invoices, shell contracts, misappropriated funds. It's meticulous. If we present this, his credibility dissolves instantly." Elena looked down at the notes written in her father's careful script. Each line felt like a heartbeat. "Not yet," she whispered. Lila frowned. "You're waiting for something?" "Yes." Elena's eyes lifted, steady and clear. "For him to show who he truly is." Later that night, rain drummed softly against the glass. Elena sat alone at her kitchen table, the documents spread before her. In the quiet, her father's voice seemed to rise again, that low, patient tone she'd known since childhood. "Strength is not loud, Hija. It is precise. It waits until the moment matters." She closed the folder gently. The time was coming. Across the city, Thomas sat in a dim bar, glass in hand, the glow of his phone reflecting off the table. He scrolled through messages unanswered, contacts growing cold. People who once smiled now hesitated to return his calls. Rumors moved faster than he could chase them. He had built his world on perception. The charming consultant, the confident negotiator. Now whispers of deceit crept through corridors he once commanded. He took another drink, his thoughts circling back to Elena, the woman who had walked away without a word, whose silence unnerved him more than any threat. He typed again. "You think you've won, but I know things too." He stared at the message before sending it. It felt hollow even to him. The next day, Elena visited her father's old clinic on the edge of the city. The sign was faded now, the door locked, the waiting room dim behind dusty glass. She pressed her hand to the cool metal, remembering the scent of antiseptic, the murmur of patience, her father's steady voice. Inside those walls, he had built more than a practice. He had built faith, one life at a time. Judges, teachers, workers, strangers, all equal beneath his care. And many of them now held positions of quiet influence. She stood there for a long while, the wind brushing against her coat. A truth settled deeper within her. Her father hadn't left her wealth. He had left her a map, not of streets, but of hearts. People who owed him not favors, but gratitude, and gratitude when awakened could move mountains. Back at her apartment, a new envelope awaited her. No return address, just her name, typed neatly across the front. Inside, a single page. "Stop before it's too late. You don't know who you're dealing with." The words were meant to threaten. Instead, they confirmed what she already suspected. Someone else was watching. Elena folded the letter, slid it into a drawer, and locked it. Fear flickered, brief, electric, then steadied into resolve. She wasn't the one in danger. The truth was, and truth demanded guardianship. That night, she met Lila again, this time at a quiet rooftop overlooking the city lights. Wind carried the scent of rain and steel. "He's lashing out," Lila said, hair whipping across her face. "Anonymous threats, false filings, classic deflection. We can end this now." Elena shook her head slowly. "No, it must unfold. People need to see him fall by his own hand." Lila studied her, then nodded. "Then we wait." They stood together in silence, the skyline glittering below like scattered embers. In the distance, thunder rumbled, faint but certain. When Elena returned home, the apartment felt different, charged, as if the air itself held its breath. She placed her coat aside and approached the table where the folder rested. She traced her fingers along the edge, a quiet vow forming beneath her touch. No more silence, no more erasure. Some truths didn't roar. They revealed, slowly, inexorably, until the world could no longer look away. Outside, lightning flared across the horizon. In its brief light, her reflection glimmered in the window, calm, resolute, waiting. The storm was gathering, and she was ready. The summons arrived on a Tuesday morning, slid under her office door like a shadow. Elena recognized the letterhead instantly, Vale and Associates, Thomas's firm, his pride, his fortress. She unfolded the papers slowly. The language was sharp, calculated. Allegations of misappropriation, claims of concealed assets, formal demand for arbitration. All lies, all noise, a desperate man clawing for ground that no longer existed. Elena set the papers aside, steadying her breath. Her reflection in the glass wall behind her looked composed. Black suit, hair pinned, eyes calm. But beneath the surface, a current moved, not anger, not fear, but certainty. He was accelerating toward ruin, and the truth would be the slope. By afternoon, Lila arrived at the office, her stride brisk, a folder tucked under her arm. She placed it on the desk without a word. Inside were transcripts, recorded conversations, voice messages, emails Thomas had sent over the years, mocking her heritage, questioning her worth, threatening to fix her reputation, each word a nail in the coffin he'd built himself. Lila crossed her arms. He's made this easy. We could file counterclaims today and end it. Elena shook her head. No, let him speak first. Let him believe the stage is his. The lawyer studied her. You're sure? I'm sure, Elena replied. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of something unbreakable. Outside the window, clouds were thickening, bruised gray rolling over the city's edge. That night, Elena returned to her apartment, rain pattering against the balcony rail. The air smelled of metal and coming thunder. She laid her father's file across the table, spreading its pages like a map. Letters from judges thanking him for compassion. Testimonials from families he'd saved. Records of Thomas's deception meticulously catalogued. Transfers, forgeries, whispered slurs turned into evidence. She traced a line of handwriting, her father's ink faded but firm. Patience, my child. Justice grows in silence before it speaks. Her throat tightened. She had learned to survive in silence. Now she would learn to speak. A knock startled her. 3 short raps, deliberate. She opened the door to find Matteo, her junior engineer, soaked from the rain. His eyes were wide, uncertain. Elena, he said, voice low. Thomas came to the office after you left. He was different, angry. He asked about your projects, about the council contracts. He wanted files. Her pulse quickened. Did you give him anything? Matteo shook his head. No, but he said he had proof you falsified documents. Elena's jaw tightened. He's grasping at ghosts. Still, something inside her shifted. Not doubt, but readiness. The storm was no longer approaching. It was here. The next day, Thomas made his move. He held a press conference, a last desperate display. Under bright lights, he stood before cameras, voice slick with practiced charm. I've discovered serious irregularities in recent city contracts, he declared. Misrepresentations by former partners. We owe the public transparency. He never said her name. He didn't have to. By evening, headlines spread. Vague insinuations, whispers of scandal. Online forums buzzed. Anonymous voices questioned her competence, her integrity, her rise. Lila called within the hour. He's trying to poison the narrative. Elena stood at her window, city lights flickering below like restless eyes. Let him talk, she said. Every lie draws the truth closer. 3 days later, the courtroom filled again. The air was heavier this time, charged with anticipation. Reporters lined the benches. Clerks whispered. Even the judge seemed aware something beyond procedure hovered in the room. Thomas entered first, flanked by attorneys in tailored suits. His confidence had cracks now, subtle but visible. He adjusted his cufflinks twice before sitting. Elena followed, her steps measured, her gaze unwavering. Lila carried the thick folder, the one marked Marquis' estate. The judge glanced over the docket. We are here to address claims of concealed assets and professional misconduct. Thomas's lawyer stood, voice smooth. Your Honor, my client has reason to believe Ms. Marquez engaged in deceptive financial practices. Lila rose before he could finish. Your Honor, before responding, we'd like to submit supplemental evidence. Documents compiled by the late Dr. Gabriel Marquez directly relevant to these proceedings. A murmur rippled through the room. The judge gestured. Proceed. Lila approached, placing the folder on the bench. This file contains verified records of Mr. Vale's fraudulent activities, dating back 6 years, forged contracts, misappropriated funds, and repeated acts of defamation against my client. Thomas stiffened. The mask faltered. The judge flipped through the pages, brows tightening. "These are serious allegations. They are facts," Lila said calmly, "corroborated by independent audits and sworn affidavits." Thomas surged to his feet. "This is fabrication. She's manipulating." The judge's gavel cracked once. "Sit down, Mr. Vale." Silence fell, thick as smoke. Elena sat still, her pulse steady, her father's words echoing in her mind. This was not vengeance. This was revelation. The session adjourned with the promise of investigation. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions, their voices colliding in the damp air. Elena walked past them without a word. She didn't need statements. The truth was already moving, quiet and inexorable. Lila caught up beside her. "You've turned the tide." "No," Elena said softly. "The tide was always there. We only stepped aside to let it rise." That night, Thomas sat alone in his office, papers scattered across his desk. The city outside blurred in the rain. His phone buzzed with unanswered calls, messages from partners withdrawing support. His name, once polished, now whispered with suspicion. He poured a drink with unsteady hands. For the first time, he felt what she had felt for years: invisibility, the slow, suffocating erasure. But unlike her, he hadn't built a soul strong enough to survive it. Back in her apartment, Elena stood before her father's photograph. His smile seemed warmer now, alive in the lamplight. "You were right," she whispered. "Silence was never surrender. It was preparation." Lightning flared across the sky, illuminating her reflection in the glass, calm, resolute, unshaken. The investigation would take weeks. Reckonings required time. But tonight, the first crack had appeared in Thomas's empire, and through that crack, light was beginning to pour. She turned off the lamp and stepped into the dark, unafraid. The storm had broken, and she was its quiet eye. The city woke beneath a washed sky, the storm spent but not forgotten. Streets glistened in the pale light, puddles mirroring fragments of clouds. Inside her office, Elena stood at the window, coffee cooling in her hand. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt the stillness that follows thunder, the heavy quiet before truth fully breaks. Behind her, Lila paced, folders spread across the desk. The judge's clerk called this morning. The investigation's moving faster than expected. They're reviewing every transaction Thomas touched. Elena turned, setting her cup down. "He won't survive that scrutiny." "No," Lila said. "But be careful. Desperate men make dangerous choices." Elena nodded. She had seen the fear in his eyes at the last hearing. Not anger, not even hatred, but the terror of exposure. A man who built his power on illusion could not endure the mirror. Still, part of her wondered what ruin would do to him. Would it teach him humility, or only deepen the rot? She pushed the thought aside. Justice wasn't about vengeance. It was about clarity. By noon, a courier arrived with a thin package. No sender, no return address. Lila opened it while Elena watched. Inside, a single flash drive and a note scrawled in block letters, "For your eyes, not the courts." They exchanged glances. Elena slid the drive into her laptop. The screen blinked, then filled with video, grainy, time-stamped. A bar, dim light. Thomas hunched over a table with two men in suits, their voices hushed but clear. "We bury the numbers, move the invoices offshore," one said. Thomas nodded. "And if anyone asks," the architect signed off. Elena froze. Lila leaned in, eyes narrowing. "That's embezzlement. and attempted fraud pinned on you. Who sent this? Elena whispered. Someone who wants him gone, Lila said. Or someone playing a deeper game. Elena's pulse slowed, steadying. Evidence had power, but motives mattered more. Whoever sent this had chosen their moment carefully. She copied the file, locked the drive in her safe, and closed her laptop. "We don't rush," she said. "Not yet." Lila studied her. "You're not afraid?" "I've lived with worse ghosts," Elena replied. Her voice didn't shake. That evening, she walked alone along the river where her new bridge would rise, steel ribs stretching across the dark water, half built, half dreamed. The scent of wet concrete and rust filled the air. Floodlights cast long shadows, illuminating the skeleton of what would soon connect two sides of the city. She traced her fingers along the cold metal railing. Her father's words returned, soft and sure. "Build with purpose, Hija. Bridges are not only for distance, but for dignity." She had built her life the same way, span by span, despite the undertow of doubt. Now, as the world watched her through the lens of scandal and rumor, the structure of her truth was rising, unshakable. She looked out across the water, and for the first time in months, the reflection staring back felt whole. 2 days later, Thomas called. She let it ring 3 times before answering. "Elena," his voice rasped, "you've made your point. Drop this." "Drop what?" Her tone was quiet, almost gentle. "You're ruining everything. Clients are leaving. Investors are calling. Do you want me destroyed?" She closed her eyes. "You did that yourself." Silence, then a sharp breath. "I can fix this," he said. "We can fix this. You walk away, I walk away." "No." Just one word, calm, final. He laughed, bitter and frayed. "You think you're better than me now?" "No," she said softly. "Just freer." The line went dead. She stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it down. The conversation left no triumph, only an ache. The residue of something once shared now turned to ash. But beneath that ache was something steadier. Release. The following week, the investigation deepened. Witnesses came forward, former partners, accountants, clients. Each statement added weight to the case. Thomas's firm began to fracture. Employees resigned quietly. Contracts were withdrawn. Lila kept her informed, but Elena stayed focused on work. Blueprints, calculations, steel and light. Every precise line reminded her who she was beyond the noise. Yet at night, when the apartment went still, she felt the undercurrent of something larger, her father's design, unfolding like a hidden pattern. It wasn't only about Thomas. It was about every person who had doubted her worth, every room where silence had been mistaken for weakness. The truth wasn't simply coming to light. It was claiming space. One evening, while reviewing plans, she received an unexpected message from Judge Morales, an old patient of her father's. "Your father once saved my life. I haven't forgotten. If you need the court's ear, you have it." She read the words twice, emotion rising quietly behind her ribs. Gratitude. Loyalty. The legacy her father built, invisible but unbreakable, was moving through the world like a tide. She whispered to the photograph on her desk, "You knew, didn't you?" The smile in the frame seemed to answer. Meanwhile, Thomas spiraled. Rumors of the investigation reached his investors. Accounts were frozen. His lawyer withdrew representation. Alone in his office, surrounded by trophies of a fading empire, he stared at the headlines, his name now tethered to words like fraud and disgrace. He thought of Elena, her quiet gaze, her patience. He had mocked her silence, never realizing it was the very thing that would undo him. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be invisible, and this time, no one was watching to admire. Days blurred into weeks. The court date drew closer. Elena moved through each day with calm precision. Meetings, filings, strategy sessions with Lila. But beneath the surface, emotion built. Not rage, but something gentler, fiercer. Resolve. Justice wasn't loud. It was measured, and when it arrived, it would not shout. It would stand. The night before the next hearing, Elena returned to the river. The bridge was nearly complete now, beams connected, cables taut, spanning the water with silent strength. She walked to the center, the city stretching on both sides, lights shimmering on the dark current below. The air was cool, filled with the scent of rain. Closing her eyes, she whispered, "We're almost there." In that stillness, she felt it, the convergence of past and present, silence and speech, shadow and light. Tomorrow, the truth would stand on its own. She turned toward the city, wind brushing her face like a promise. Behind her, thunder rolled again across the horizon, low, distant, inevitable. The storm hadn't ended. It was waiting. The courthouse smelled of rain and polished oak. Light filtered through high windows, fractured by thin clouds outside. Reporters lined the corridor, their cameras idle for now, their whispers low. Everyone knew this hearing would decide more than assets or contracts. It would decide truth. Elena walked through the crowd with measured steps, Lila at her side. She wore a charcoal suit, hair pulled back, her face calm. Not cold, but composed, like someone who had walked through fire and learned its language. Thomas stood near the courtroom doors, voice low as he argued with his lawyer. His eyes flicked toward her, sharp and frantic, like a man trying to recognize the shape of his own downfall. She met his gaze briefly, not with triumph, but with a quiet finality. He looked away first. Inside, the room felt different than before, heavier, as if anticipation itself had mass. The judge entered, robes sweeping across the floor, and silence fell. "Let us proceed," he said. "We will hear final evidence regarding the claims of misconduct." Lila rose. "Your Honor, we submit Exhibit F, verified recordings and financial records provided under court seal." The clerk carried the file forward. Pages spread across the bench like open wounds. The judge examined each one, brow furrowing. "These documents," he said slowly, "show clear evidence of falsified invoices and diverted funds from municipal contracts. Signatures forged, accounts concealed." Thomas shifted in his seat. His lawyer whispered urgently, but his face had already drained of color. Lila continued. "In addition, we present audio evidence, statements made by Mr. Vale acknowledging these actions and implicating Ms. Marquez to conceal his fraud." The recording played. Thomas's voice filled the room, smooth, confident, damning. "We bury the numbers offshore. The architect signs off. No one asks questions." The words hung in the air, heavy and irrevocable. A ripple of murmurs spread through the gallery. Elena sat perfectly still, her father's calm reflected in her every breath. The judge turned toward Thomas. "Do you deny these are your words?" Thomas opened his mouth, then closed it again. His hands trembled against the table. I was misled. Those conversations were taken out of context." Lila stepped forward. "Your Honor, timestamps match financial transfers made under Mr. Vale's authorization. The context is clear." The judge nodded once. "We will recess for review." His gavel struck the block, a single, echoing note. Outside the courtroom, cameras erupted. "Ms. Marquez, Did you know about the offshore accounts? Do you believe justice will prevail? What's your response to the recordings? Elena paused only long enough to answer one question. My father taught me that truth takes time, she said. It's speaking now. Then she walked on. Lila caught up, breath quick. You handled that perfectly. Elena gave a faint smile. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. They stepped into the courtyard where rain slicked the cobblestones, puddles reflecting shards of gray sky. Thunder rumbled again in the distance, not threatening, but affirming, as though the world itself acknowledged the shift. Later, in her apartment, Elena lit a candle on her father's desk. The flame wavered, its glow tracing the edges of framed photographs, his gentle smile, the clinic he built, the people he served. She opened his final letter once more, fingertips brushing the familiar ink. There will come a day, Hisha, when silence no longer protects you but reveals you. On that day, stand tall. Let truth do the rest. Tears stung her eyes, not of sorrow but gratitude. Everything he had prepared was unfolding exactly as he intended. She whispered, I'm standing, Papa. The next morning, a call came from Judge Morales. Elena, he said, voice steady, the court has concluded its review. The evidence is decisive. Thomas Vale faces formal charges, fraud, perjury, defamation. The assets remain yours. The record will reflect your integrity. For a long moment she said nothing. Then softly, thank you. When the call ended, she sat in the quiet, breathing in the weightless air. Vindication didn't roar, it exhaled. Across the city, Thomas's world collapsed. Bank accounts frozen, partnerships severed. His name spread across headlines, stripped of prestige. He tried calling allies, none answered. The men who once toasted his success now turned away. In his empty office, he stared at the framed certificates, the symbols of a life built on fabrication. The silence pressed against him, thick and merciless. He thought of Elena, her stillness, her restraint. He had mistaken it for weakness. Now he understood. She had been listening all along, waiting for the truth to gather strength. And it had. Meanwhile, Elena returned to the river. The bridge gleamed in the afternoon light, nearly finished, a testament to endurance, its arches rising like open hands. Workers moved across the deck, their voices mingling with the hum of machines. She watched in silence, the scent of steel and fresh rain wrapping around her. One of the foremen approached. We're ahead of schedule, he said. Should be ready for the dedication next month. Elena smiled faintly. Then let's make sure it stands 100 years. As he walked away, she lingered, fingertips resting on the cool railing. The water below shimmered with shifting reflections, fragments of sky, clouds, and light woven together. This bridge would outlast scandal, whispers, and wounds. It would carry her father's name in spirit, a structure of grace built from quiet strength. That evening, Lila joined her at the office for the final review. Papers signed, cases closed. It's over, Lila said, voice soft with satisfaction. Elena shook her head gently. Not over. Just beginning. Lila tilted her head. What do you mean? Elena looked toward the blueprint pinned on the wall, not the bridge, but a new design. A community center dedicated to mentorship, learning, resilience. Her father's legacy would not end in survival. It would become foundation. She turned back to Lila, eyes steady. He tried to erase me. I'll answer by building something no one can ignore. Outside, the sky deepened into violet dusk. The first stars blinked faintly through thinning clouds. Elena stood by the window, the city stretching below, lights pulsing like a living heartbeat. She felt no triumph, only clarity. Justice had spoken, but its echo was not loud. It was steady, like the river beneath her bridge. She whispered into the quiet, "Strength isn't the fight. It's what remains when the fight is done." A single knock sounded at the door. She turned, breath caught, heart still, unsure what awaited on the other side. The candle flickered. The door remained closed. For now. The knock echoed once, then faded into silence. Elena stood motionless, hand hovering over the handle, heart steady but alert. For a long moment she listened. No footsteps, no voices, just the hush of the corridor and the soft hum of city lights through the glass. Finally, she opened the door. A courier stood there, rain clinging to his jacket. He offered a sealed envelope, nodded politely, and left without a word. Elena closed the door behind her, the sound crisp in the quiet. The envelope bore no sender, only her name typed neatly across the front. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but recognition. The story wasn't finished yet. She broke the seal. Inside lay a single page, handwritten in slanted script. Every truth awakens an echo. Some call it consequence. Some call it redemption. Meet me by the river tomorrow at dusk. L. She read it twice, brow furrowing. Lila never used initials, and yet the handwriting wasn't Thomas's. Something deeper stirred, a thread pulling her toward the water once more. She folded the note carefully, setting it beside her father's candle. Whatever awaited at the river, it would demand clarity. She was ready. The next day unfolded quietly. Meetings blurred into motion. Phone calls faded into routine. But beneath every moment ran a current of anticipation, guiding her toward the river as the sun dipped low behind the skyline. By dusk, she stood on the bridge, her bridge, the structure complete, gleaming beneath the copper sky. The water below shimmered, restless and reflective. A figure waited near the center, coat billowing softly in the wind. As she approached, the outline sharpened. It wasn't Lila, it was Daniel Ruiz, an investigative journalist she'd met briefly months ago, back when rumors first circled, when truth was still half hidden. He turned as she neared, eyes shadowed but intent. "Elena," he greeted quietly. "Thank you for coming." Her voice stayed calm. The note said L. "I'm the source," he admitted. "Your father helped me once, years ago, when I was still a student, chasing a story no one would touch. He saved my mother's life. He asked nothing in return." The wind carried the faint scent of rain. Elena's chest tightened. Why reach out now? Daniel pulled a small recorder from his coat. Because there's more. Thomas wasn't working alone. She stilled. "What do you mean?" He clicked play. Static, then voices, low, deliberate. A council official, another developer, speaking of kickbacks, manipulated bids, contracts exchanged in shadows. Thomas was only one piece of a wider rot. Daniel stopped the recording. "Your father gathered pieces before he died, but the network's bigger than anyone knew. If you go public, you can finish what he started." Elena's gaze drifted over the water, reflections fractured by ripples. Justice wasn't a single battle. It was a chain, each link forged by courage, each echo calling for the next voice. Her father's truth had broken the first barrier. Now others waited. She turned back. "Why give this to me?" "Because people listen to those who've endured," Daniel said. "You carry his legacy, and your silence commands more weight than their noise." For a moment, the world narrowed. Wind, river, light, and within it, a choice. To end the story here or extend it into something larger than vengeance. Elena closed her eyes briefly, hearing her father's voice within the stillness. Justice, Hiha, is not a single light. It's a constellation. She opened them again, steady. Then we finish it, together. Daniel nodded once, pocketing the recorder. I'll prepare the article. You'll have final review. As he walked away, the bridge stretched behind him. Her design, her strength, her truth made visible. And in that glow of evening, Elena felt the pulse of something vast, a movement beginning. That night, she sat at her father's desk, the candle flickering beside the open folder. The evidence lay complete now. Thomas's fraud, the council's corruption, the tangled web finally exposed to light. Her hands rested over the papers, palms open. So much of her life had been built in silence, endurance mistaken for passivity, patience for surrender. But silence, she realized, had always been her weapon. It had gathered strength, waiting for the right moment to speak. And that moment was now. She drafted a statement, precise, unwavering, announcing her partnership with Daniel Ruiz, her intent to release the findings publicly, her vow to honor the truth her father began. When she finished, she read it aloud into the empty room, voice steady as stone. Each word landed like a promise. Days passed. The article broke. Headlines spread across the city. Architects' evidence uncovers widespread corruption in council contracts. Officials resigned. Investigations launched. Voices once silent began to rise. Workers, partners, community leaders, each stepping forward with their own truths. Through it all, Elena stayed composed, speaking rarely, acting deliberately. When cameras found her, she answered with clarity. I didn't expose them, she said. They exposed themselves. I only opened the window. Thomas watched from the shadows of obscurity, his name now synonymous with betrayal. For weeks, he tried to summon anger, to blame her, the council, fate, but nothing remained. Only emptiness. He understood too late what she had mastered. Power built on noise collapses. Power built on truth endures. And so he faded quietly, the echo of his arrogance lost beneath the rising hum of a city rebuilding. Months later, the bridge opened to the public. Crowds gathered under a bright sky, music swelling as ribbons fluttered in the breeze. Children laughed, cameras flashed, speeches filled the air. Elena stood at the podium, the river gleaming behind her. This bridge, she began, is not just steel and stone. It's proof that what's built with integrity stands, and when truth is hidden, time will lift it into light. Applause surged like a wave. As it faded, she looked toward the horizon where clouds gathered, thin and luminous. Some storms never vanished. They transformed into rivers, into bridges, into strength. That evening, long after the crowd dispersed, Elena crossed the bridge alone. The city glowed beneath her, vibrant, alive, redeemed. She paused at the center, leaning on the rail, breath slow and steady. In the dark water below, lights shimmered like constellations. Her father's voice whispered through memory. You were never invisible. They just weren't ready to see. She smiled faintly, whispering into the wind. They see now. Behind her, footsteps approached. Quiet, measured, familiar. She turned, eyes narrowing. A silhouette stood at the far end, waiting, unmoving. The light shifted. The story wasn't done. Not yet. The silhouette stood at the edge of the bridge, haloed by streetlight and drifting mist. Elena's breath slowed, her fingers tightening on the cold railing. For a moment, the city's hum faded. Only the river's soft murmur remained, carrying echoes of everything she'd endured. Then the figure stepped forward. It was Thomas. No suit, no arrogance. Just a man stripped bare, his shoulders sagging beneath the weight of consequences he could no longer outrun. She didn't move. He stopped a few feet away, rain glistening in his hair, eyes hollow but clear. "I read the article," he said quietly. "You finished what I started to ruin." Elena's voice was steady. "You didn't ruin it. You revealed it." He looked away, staring down at the water. "I wanted to destroy you. I thought if I broke you, I'd win. But all I did was expose what you always were, stronger than the lie I built." The wind swept between them, carrying the scent of rain and steel. She felt neither anger nor triumph, only the quiet understanding that some defeats were necessary for truth to rise. Thomas took a breath. "They're indicting me next week. Fraud, defamation, conspiracy. My partner's turned on me. My name's gone." Elena remained still. Names fade. Character remains. He flinched, but nodded slowly. "I deserved this. All of it. I just needed to say, I see you now, for what you are." She met his gaze, not with forgiveness, but recognition. "You see a reflection of what you could have been." Silence settled. He glanced once more at the river, then back at her. "Do you ever wish it had been different?" Her answer came softly. "It was different. I just stopped pretending it wasn't." He exhaled, shoulders sinking. "Goodbye, Elena." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. He turned, footsteps fading across the bridge, disappearing into the fog. And with each step, the last remnants of his shadow lifted from her life. Morning came golden and clear. Sunlight spilled across her office, pooling over blueprints and polished wood. The city below buzzed with renewal, streets busy, buildings alive with new purpose. Lila entered with a smile, holding a stack of papers. "The council approved your new proposal. The Marquez Foundation will fund the scholarships. First class starts this fall." Elena looked up, warmth flickering behind her calm eyes. "Then we begin." For months, she'd shaped the foundation, a sanctuary for young architects from overlooked communities, dreamers silenced by the same prejudice she'd faced. Now it stood ready to open, carrying her father's name and her own resolve. Lila leaned against the desk. "You've turned everything they used to wound you into something that heals." Elena smiled faintly. That was always the lesson. Build where they tried to break. Outside, the river glimmered like a vein of light, the bridge rising proud across it, a monument to endurance, connection, truth. That evening, Elena returned to the bridge one last time before the dedication ceremony. The air was cool, fragrant with dusk and the distant hum of the city. She paused at the center, hands resting on the rail. A family crossed behind her, a mother laughing with her children, their voices ringing bright. A young couple walked hand in hand. A man paused to take a photograph of the skyline. Life flowed freely, unaware of the battles that had carved the path beneath their feet. She closed her eyes. For so long, silence had been her armor, the stillness that bore every insult, every dismissal, every shadow of doubt. But now, silence had changed. It wasn't defense anymore. It was peace. Her father's voice echoed gently through memory. "Respect cannot be demanded, Hija. It must be revealed, through grace, through truth, through what endures." She opened her eyes to the horizon. The city stretched before her, imperfect, luminous, alive. The next day, the dedication ceremony drew hundreds. Officials, journalists, students, neighbors, faces from every part of her journey, allies, skeptics, strangers transformed into believers. Elena stepped onto the podium, the wind brushing through her hair. Cameras flashed, but she spoke not to them. She spoke to the crowd, to the city, to the echo of her father's heart. "This bridge is more than architecture," she said. "It's the sum of every quiet act of courage that built it. It stands for those who were doubted, dismissed, unseen. It stands because silence can hold strength, and strength, when revealed, becomes light." Applause rose, rolling across the water like a tide. When it faded, she lifted her gaze to the sky, blue, open, endless. The fight was done, but the legacy was just beginning. That night, her apartment glowed softly with candlelight. She sat at her father's desk, a framed photo beside her, his smile steady, eyes warm. She opened her journal and began to write. "You taught me that worth isn't given, it's proven. You taught me to listen when the world shouts, and to rise when it turns away. I carried your lessons into silence. Now I carry them into light." Her pen paused. Justice wasn't revenge. It was recognition, and I have been seen. She closed the journal, set down the pen, and exhaled. Outside, the city pulsed with quiet music, horns in the distance, footsteps on wet pavement, laughter drifting through open windows, every sound a reminder. Life moves forward. She stood, walking to the window, gazing at the bridge gleaming beneath the moon. Its arches glowed silver, steady and strong, a testament to everything that had come before. For a long time, she simply watched. No speeches, no tears, just the quiet satisfaction of a story fulfilled. The candle's flame flickered beside her, neither fragile nor fierce, only constant. Elena whispered into the stillness, "You can rest now, Papa." Beyond the glass, dawn began to gather at the horizon, soft, patient, unstoppable. She turned away from the window, the sound of her footsteps fading into the warmth of morning. The silence no longer carried weight. It carried light. And the light would carry her forward forever.